All right, welcome listeners. This is another episode of Coop Cattlemen, an original ACA podcast. I'm excited to be sitting down with Jennifer Lewis for the second time. Jennifer is from Ellensburg, Washington. Did I say that right?
Ellensburg, that's correct.
Ellensburg with Wakefield Farms. So pretty excited to be sitting down with Jennifer. We're gonna kind of roll into one of the features that's new on the Akka website. But before we do that, Jennifer, would you just give the listeners a quick introduction and kind of just let them know what you guys are up to with your cattle?
So, I'm the herd manager for Wakefield Farms. We're a kind of diversified family operation. We do other things. We grow hay. We have an excavation business. My husband has a normal, regular job, so we do a lot of stuff. And we have between the two farms, we have about 160 acres. But I don't have my cows on very much of that. My cows are stuck with the stuff that is good for nothing else, which means they kind of cling to the side of a hillside like a goat. Um, and Ellensburg is, we're kind of unique in that we're extremely arid here. We have pretty much a desert climate, but we have a lot of water out of snow melt, and it allows us to grow really premium hay. My cows are fat all the time, no matter what, and all I feed them is hay. Hay and pasture. That's it. Nothing special. I'm not doing cover crops. I'm not nothing. It's just the grass here is pretty unusually good. So that's kind of in a nutshell. It's kind of what we do here. We just get blown around at this time of year. Got a lot of wind.
Same here. Yeah, we're all getting blown around here in the Midwest too. So are you feeding it's just strictly grass hay then?
Yeah, yeah. I have a little bit of alfalfa that I feed to my weanlings or to my bulls. But my cows, they like through the winter, they they get a grass hay that's primarily Timothy based. And it's usually runs about between 8 and 10% protein. But we have hard grass pastures. And so our fibers are it's completely different. It's very digestible um hay. It puts fat on bad cows.
Sure.
My vet says that Ellensburg is where bad cows come because it's as close as they can get to heaven.
Hey, that sounds nice. We're gonna have to come check it out. No, we do the same. We feed just strictly a grass hay, nothing special, and good grief, you'd think we were feeding them, you know, silage or something. They're a bunch of fatties out.
Right?
But that's the Highlands for you. Well, good deal. So,
Yep.
Jennifer, you're on the genomics committee. Which I think it was the last episode we talked with Josh, who's the chair of it, of that committee.
Yep.
And well, and also you're the chair of the education committee, which is which we've talked quite a bit about on the podcast too. But so as far as the genomics committee, we talked a little bit about this beforehand. Part of what you were doing, it sounds like, was looking into this Mating Predictor that's what we're going to talk about now. Um, can you kind of give us an idea of how you came about that, and maybe we can get into how we can find it on the website and then go from there.
So the genomics committee spends a lot of time trying to figure out how how we can get tools to people to give them more information when they're making breeding decisions. And the North American population of Highland cattle is pretty line bred, both mostly to Lewis of Doonstide, who is a Scottish bull that was imported by Glen Osprey Farms in, I believe it was the early 70s. Um, and we also have a significant, I mean, you would be hard pressed to find animals in this country that don't go back to that bull at least once. And many of our modern Highlands go back to him 50, 60, 70 times. So the population is getting more line bred over time. And it's a kind of line breeding that people are not necessarily aware of. Usually, when you pull up the herd book, you see three generations. On your registration, you see three generations. But when you get back five, six, seven generations, then all of a sudden you're like, wait, this one's related to that one, and that one's related to that one, and wow, they're going back to him a lot. And because we're aware of how how we're becoming more concentrated over time, we wondered why we didn't have an inbreeding coefficient calculator. It just seemed kind of logical. I mean, calculators like that, they look at family relations. So when you plan a breeding, they go back through the pedigree and they're looking for relationships to see how how related animals are. Um, and they do that because as you most domesticated breeds of anything have a certain amount of line breeding going on. They just it just happens if you have a small population over time, it's what happens. So um, these types of calculators are really helpful in helping you avoid inbreeding depression or traits associated with inbreeding depression. And for most animals, you're looking for an inbreeding coefficient of 10% or less. Um, and for most Highlands, that's not hard to do. I know when I go through my own herd and I start playing around with different bulls that I have in my tank, ones that I might not necessarily use for a particular cow because I already know, oh, look, they're a little too related. So when I go and I do a test match between them, I look at that percentage and I go, oh, I'm still under 10%. It's like, 6%. But, you know, it's having that mating predictor there kind of helps people without having to go back and figure out the relatedness of some of these distant relatives and figuring out, because over time it multiplies. Um, and like I said, let's put it this way, we have a lot of line breeding going on that people have been unaware of. And I am actually a big proponent of using line breeding in a very intentional way. You can set good traits, you can bring bad traits out, so then you can breed them out. So line breeding in and of itself is not a bad thing, but I would say when it's going on in the background and it's unintentional and you're not aware of it, that can cause problems for people. That's when you start seeing like funky horn growth. Not the kind you see where it's clearly an injury that's caused one horn to go up or down. I have a classic example in my herd. I have a cow that has horns that curl forward. Last year we had to take the bandsaw to her horns because one horn was about a half an inch before it actually started pressing in on her face.
Mm.
So that horn growth, that horn set probably is can be easily laid at the feet of a lot of line breeding that was going on behind her that was intentional, but it wasn't being done for the reason that most of us do it. Um, it was being done to maintain a closed herd as opposed to doing it specifically to set traits. Fortunately, some of the bulls behind her were quite good. And the rib spring that she got from Constellation of Swains is very lovely, but the horns are not. The, we refer to her as the troll, and I want to Photoshop new horns on her. Um, but when I go and I run that mating predictor on her sire and her dam, it only shows up at I think it was 4%. And yet, and so it's not something that's affected, for example, her fertility. It's not brought out undesirable undesirable traits that would affect her function as a cow. It just, you see it in the horns where that's not the kind of, it was a negative trait that has been compounded over time. And it's the very devil to breed that out, let me tell you.
Mm. So just so
Takes time. Takes about 2 or 3 generations to get rid of it.
to get rid, okay. So
To get a normal horn set.
okay. So you're trying to stay under 10% as far as
Yep.
relations go. Is that correct?
As far as the relatedness goes, yes. But I will say for me personally, um, I I find the mating predictor helpful and very interesting because it kind of allows me to quickly make certain decisions. Um, I am still, even though I have this mating predictor, I am still counting how many times does a cow or a bull go back to the same ancestor. Um, and the ancestor that I'm concerned with is Lewis of Doonside. I am not concerned about how many times they go back to Gilly Bowie of Benmore. You can't get him without getting Lewis. Sometimes you find some really interesting things in a pedigree. Um, if you go, some of the animals here in the Northwest have a lot of Canadian blood in them, and you'll find a breeding program, Zetland, and sometimes you'll find some crazy line breeding that is going on with Zetland, but it's not enough to affect that overall um, coefficient that you come up with. So no, it's but I find it interesting and I find it useful in helping me understand just how related an animal and the offspring from a pairing would be. Um, but I'm still going back on my own cows and on bulls that I use, going, wow, how many times do you go back? Oh, you go back 20 times. Well, you go back 25 times. that means your offspring is going to go back 45 times. Well, then who do I breed her to so that then I'm not going back 60, 70, 80 times?
Hmm.
So, so I'm still very aware of how many times we're going back to the same animal.
Okay. Sure.
And at the end of the day, like, so as people use tools like this and as the genomics committee is able to develop other tools to help people make breeding decisions, at the end of the day, you are breeding the animal that is in front of you. And that what's behind them is really important. The results of genetic testing, the genomic testing for traits and genetic conditions, all of those things have a place in the decisions that you make. But at the end of the day, it is the animal that is in front of you that is the important thing that you're breeding. You're not breeding the paper. You don't eat the paper. So you're not breeding the paper, you're breeding the animal in front of you. And sometimes sometimes you'll have a gut feeling and everything is telling you this is a horrible idea, and you're like, well, I feel like doing it anyway. And you do it, and the result can be unexpectedly great, or it can be predictably crap. So you just kind of you just even if all of these outside, genomic tests, genetic tests, and mating predictors, if they all are saying this is a great match, you can still get complete and total crap
Mhm.
because maybe you didn't factor in really what was in front of you, the animals that were in front of you, and you were doing it strictly off of numbers. Um, so most most people, it's a most of the cattlemen that I have talked to that are making use of EPDs and now these genomic tests that are out there, most of my neighbors that I've talked to, they're really blending things. Some of them are strictly numbers guys. All they're concerned about is the numbers. They got they got herd managers and cowboys that are making the other decisions. Others, they've got all of this information and it helps them in their decision, but they're still approaching it as what's in front of me. Like I've got all of these numbers, but what am I really seeing? So, I mean, that is, and ultimately, I mean, that's been a hard thing for me to learn is to kind of, you you have all these dreams that have to do with the paper and the animals behind a breeding. Um, and you kind of have to let go of some of that to a certain extent and look at what's in front of you and really breed what's in front of you. Um, and we have a niche breed where, the tools that are available to our people are pretty limited. And the mating predictor, it has a certain utility to it, and I really hope people play around with it and get comfortable with using it and understanding that it's going to show you how related animals are behind that breeding. But you still trust me when I say looking at 3 generations isn't enough. Looking at 5 generations is helpful. Going back beyond that can be really eye-opening. And and some of those animals that are back there 5, 6, 7 generations somehow still are having a huge influence on what you see in front of you,
Sure.
good and bad.
Sure. That makes sense. So for the listeners, from a practical standpoint, I just wanted to pull up the ACA website, which is highlandcattleusa.org. And if you go to the tabs, it's under the herd book. And Jennifer, you and I were talking about this
Mhm.
before we started recording. It's really slow. So
It is.
it sounds like it's probably not anyone's internet. So you just have to be patient because it's coming from Australia, right, Jennifer?
It is. And, sometimes because of the time difference and stuff, I think sometimes maybe they're doing maintenance and that wouldn't affect their certain users, but affects other users. And ABRI provides herd book information to a number of registries, different species. So it's not just us. But if you go to the herd book search, and
Mhm.
if you look at the top of that page, Mating Predictor sits between EPD inquiry and member inquiry. And it's nice because you can input a registration for a bull that you're interested in using, and then you can do one cow, two cows, three cows. You can do a bunch of different cows all at once, and it will list them for you. And it won't just list them, like you can click on them and you can see what the pedigree of that offspring would look like. If you go into online transactions first before you go to the mating predictor and you sign into your account, when you go to the mating predictor, you can then just enter a bull and and click to look at to match him to your entire cow inventory.
Okay.
So then you can see, well, what does he do to your entire herd? So it's a little easier. See, I clicked on the mating predictor and it's still trying to pull it up. So it's not functioning very fast.
I'm in the same boat. But
Yeah.
just from what
Yeah.
you've done with
And
it in the
it
past,
could very well be that they're doing some kind of service that doesn't take them completely offline. It just means that it's hard to access what you're trying to access.
sure.
And I notice that when I have problems, it's usually a particular time of day, so
So maybe if
just for fun.
trying it, try it again and maybe at a different time. Yeah, I'm getting an service unavailable message. But just from playing with it in the
Yeah.
past, um, if I remember correctly, there's a place for uh dam and sire identifiers, I believe is what it says. And that is where you would put in your register. Oh, here it is. That so you have your I'm just looking at it on my phone here. So you have name,
Yeah,
enter.
you can do the registration number for the sire, registration numbers for a dam.
So that's what you would put in those sire
Yes, registration
identifier
numbers. Yeah.
registration. Okay.
And yeah, and to do multiple cows, you just do registration number, comma, and then do the next registration number.
Okay. That makes sense. And then dam calving years. It looks like you can do a set of years, for example.
Yeah, so you can that's actually more useful for you if you wanted to look at, for example, your cow inventory. So if you were signing on to your ABRI account, which if you're doing online registrations, you've got one.
Mhm.
So if you sign into that and then click on the mating predictor, it brings up a bit of a different screen, and you have an option. You can input a sire registration. You can still input, one cow or two or three, but you also have an option where you can include all of the cows in your cow inventory.
Okay.
And you can restrict that by, uh, calving years. So, so if you wanted to just look at a range of cows in
Okay.
your cow inventory, um, I mean, it just depends on how many cows you've got in your herd. If you only have less than 10 in your herd, then it's probably just more convenient to look at all of them as opposed to just trying to pull out one or two. So, but if you have 50 cows in your herd, maybe you only want to maybe you only want to use a bull on cows that were calved in 2019 and 2020.
Okay. That makes sense. Then it's got a couple other
Yeah.
categories. Max number of animals to display, display results by sire or dam, and then sort dams by. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, you can, and again, for most of us, the max number of animals to display at 50. I mean, most of us have less than 50 cows in our herd.
Mhm.
So that's kind of self-explanatory. I like to display my results by sire because I want to see a bull applied to a whole bunch of cows.
Mhm.
Um, but you could sort it differently so that you are seeing cows, and then it's just how you like to display it. Um, and I would encourage people to do both, to just see what they're more comfortable with, what makes more sense to them. For most of us, displaying the results by bull is going to make more sense. But if you have maybe three or four bulls, and you could be doing the reverse. Maybe you have three or four bulls that you're interested in your tank, and you want to look at those for maybe two or three cows that are in your herd. It's like, okay, I'm going to AI
Mhm.
which bulls do I want to use on these cows. So so there's a lot of you can move around with a lot of different things. It's funny because almost nobody has has asked really much at all about how to use it. So it's either self-explanatory, or they haven't noticed that it's there, or or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I
Um
mean, that's why I thought this would be
it's
you know, a great
yeah,
time. And then I was just gonna go, just you already touched on you can log in also. And like you said,
yep,
anybody, just for our listeners, anybody who's registered animals on the website, you have a login. But at the top there, when you click on Mating Predictor, if you there's a tab you can click on for logging in, and it'll explain how to get a login if you don't already have one. Mine's not popping up right now, but it'll kind of walk you through that. I believe you have to get a hold of Gina, maybe email Gina, something like that.
yeah, they have to set up in order to do online registrations and have a login. They have a credit card that needs to be on file for online transactions. Um, I think they can probably set you up with a login without having that credit card on file, but I wouldn't want to commit the office staff to anything.
Sure. And if you're already a member, you probably already have all of this and you already have a credit card on file anyways
Yep.
for your membership. So it
Yep.
should be
You know,
pretty.
some people like to do their registrations on paper, and some people like to do them online. I do them online because if I had to do them on paper, it probably would never happen. Um,
Yeah,
so,
we talked
you know,
about it.
they have my credit card on file, and honestly, when you log in and then use the mating predictor, it it just makes it easier if you have multiple cows in your herd that you want to look at, or if you have multiple bulls that it just means you're inputting fewer numbers. But what it's actually doing is really the same. It just how it displays it, and you don't type as much.
Mhm. Well, it seems like a fantastic resource. I mean, so many, like you said, so many people that do have Highland cattle. It seems like they do have smaller herds. Some of them might not even have bulls, and so you are AIing a lot. And this seems like a really useful tool for, those individuals who are very invested in genetics, but maybe. Maybe they just need, an extra tool like this. So listeners, if you're able to check this out online, and um it seems like it's probably the direction that the genomics committee is moving in is these types of tools for breeders. So it's exciting to see. So uh
Yeah, and you know, I know Josh gave a plug to encourage people to enter phenotypic data, and I really want to follow up with that. It's really, as we go forward, it's really important. And I think you just have to be consistent on your farm when you're entering stuff in, because essentially you're doing this for yourself. Like like you first, right? Everything that you're doing is really about what works on your farm first. And data is a really important component of keeping cattle, because you have to have something that's hard and objective when you're evaluating animals that you're going to keep. And is this animal, can I sell this animal as replacement stock, you know, as replacement heifer or seed stock, or does this animal need to go to the freezer, you know? And if you have a vet who's happy to do transvaginal spays on your heifers that you don't, you know, that aren't good enough to be breeding stock, that's a real good option for pets, you know. I know I get people that I'm sure this is a common thing with I mean, we have Highlands. They're gorgeous, and people don't necessarily want to breed them. They don't necessarily want to eat them. They just want to look at them and have them eat stuff that they don't want to maintain. And
I think we froze.
out, but
Oh,
you know, you can use hard data. You can use hard data to to make those help you make those decisions, and keeping it someplace like CattleMax where you can see that information is really valuable. And and ACA, the genomics committee, we want to do things. It's a long range goal. This isn't something that we can roll out next year. Um, but in order to be able to get any reliability for some of these tools that are out there, people have to enter data when they register their calves, things like birth weight and the dam's performance. And, even when you're not registering something, you can go in there and just update weights.
Mhm.
Like for your steers, you can enter a steer and you've got like a birth weight, and then you wean him, you've got a weaning weight. Well, then you can go back and put a yearling weight in. So, like, we really want that information. And we don't we don't register big numbers. We don't have a big membership. It's definitely in order to make things work for people, we need to get as many people doing that as we possibly can. And the mating predictor doesn't care if you do that stuff because
Mm.
it's just looking at family relationships so that you avoid the traits associated with inbreeding. Um, and honestly, most the North American population is good when you look at it through that lens. We're less good when you start looking at it through um, the lens of just how line bred are these animals becoming. They are kind of two different things. The family relationships, which people think of as line breeding, and that is true. Um, but then when you look at it as like, okay, so how many times is my animal going back to the same ancestor?
Mm.
And what happens, So it's important to know both of those things. Um, and and just so people know, if you do, for example, a mother-son mating, your inbreeding coefficient percentage that's going to come back is going to be like, wow, that's really high. And it's like, well, of course it's going to be really high. You just put a mother and a son together,
Mhm.
or it's going to be high with siblings, or so the things that you see in those first three generations, those are going to be high. They also might be incredibly intentional,
Mm.
or maybe not. I mean, maybe you have a cleanup bowl and you roll the dice and you go, well, okay, so his mom is out there. I'm crossing my fingers that AI took.
Mhm.
And maybe it does and maybe it doesn't, you know? And that is one of those things where the mating predictor can be helpful with that when you have an AI program, you have one or maybe two cleanup bowls, and you're trying to figure out, okay, so which cows does the cleanup bowl get? So you can use the mating predictor to kind of help you get to that decision a little faster. So, I
Makes
mean, and for me, that's kind of how I'm using it because I primarily AI. I have some old cows that don't really respond to an AI protocol. Um, it's not a fertility thing. They just don't respond to a protocol, and their heats are mostly silent. So the only thing you got going for you is throw them out with a bull.
Mhm.
And but the rest of my animals, they're like I said, it's a primarily AI protocol that I run here. But I have two cleanup bowls that's a whole different story. I should only have one, but I got two. Um, and so when I look at, I'm splitting my herd and which animals are going with which bull. And using a mating predictor just makes that faster, makes it easier for me to see it. Um, I've got some cows where it's like, well, okay, so, the difference with one bull, like there's 1 or 2 percentage points between one using them with one bull versus the other bull. It's like, well, what am I going to do there? I have no idea. When I split them out, then I will know. But for most of them, it made that an easier to visualize decision tree. And and that is one way that a mating predictor can help you is, you got two bulls, you input both of the sires, you look at your cow inventory, and then you just start splitting them up.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, as far as our listeners go, definitely get on the website, check check that tool out, and there are a lot of other really interesting resources on there as well that could be helpful. Jennifer, is there anything else that we haven't covered as far as the mating predictor goes that you would like to add?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty straightforward tool, If people are playing around with it and they end up with questions, just hop on the one of the Facebook groups, and post a question. Somebody will see it that's probably me that's used the mating predictor, and they can walk you through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are also great resources too. The Facebook pages, a lot of helpful people on there. So, well, thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm excited about what you guys are doing on the genomics committee. So we really look forward to, more projects and more tools that you guys are being a part of. So thank you so much. Listeners, if you want to get a hold of us at the Cattlemen, our contact information will be at the end of the episode. And then Jennifer, I'm assuming you wouldn't have any problem with anyone reaching out to you if they had questions. Is that
Nope,
okay?
nope. Yeah, they're free to reach out to me and ask me.
Okay. Well, great. And Jennifer, thank you again for your time. It's always fun talking to you. And I look forward to the next time we get a meet up.
Yep. Sounds good, Seth. You have a good evening.
All right, Jennifer, we'll talk to you soon.